Hello friends, welcome back to my corner of the internet. My name is Cait and today I'm going to be talking about my personal curriculum that I've pulled together ahead of starting my PhD. So for those that don't know, I have just completed my Masters in Literature and Arts at the University of Oxford. I will leave that video linked up here where I submitted my Master's dissertation, and now I will be going into a PhD. For those that have been here for a bit longer, you may have some questions about how this is going to work with my day job. Well, that video is going to be coming out soon, in the next 2 weeks at least. So if you are interested in seeing what is going to happen there, please do click on the subscribe button and I will share all of my latest updates on what is happening with my job at Google and what is going to happen with my PhD. But I'll give you a little glimpse into this at the moment because I have actually developed, like everyone in the world, I think, I have developed a personal curriculum to focus on for the next 3 months. And I wanted to talk about this because I know these personal curriculums are a trend. I hope it's not a trend and I hope it's something that is going to actually stick around. But I wanted to talk about this because the idea of a personal curriculum and self-study and independent study is such a great thing to me. I just find it so fantastic that so many people are going down this line of self-study and personal curriculums and learning in a way to educate themselves. There has been, obviously, in the world, there is a huge amount of turmoil and uncertainty when it comes to academic institutions, and a huge amount of academic institutions that are not responding the way that they should in this time of academic crisis. We've also got the rise of AI technologies that are threatening the way that we think and the way that we are absorbing information. Social media contributes to this significantly. And so this idea of going back to self-study and to learning outside of an academic institution is just so exciting for me. This is something that I truly value. Not only have I done my own personal curriculums for the last 5 years before they were a trend. Yes, I was cool like that. But the importance of continuing to learn and to teach yourself and to educate yourself is just so amazing. And I have seen so many more independent researchers, independent learners coming into Accepted Society, for instance, which is an online community that I co-own and provides a space for this lifelong learning, provides a space for people to come in and to learn the things that they want to learn, to self-educate themselves, and also to participate in an academic community that exists outside of an academic institution. But the members in this community is just incredible. They are so wonderful, so supportive, and everyone is there because they feel like they need a place to belong, and Accepted is that place to belong. And it just makes me really happy to see so many people jumping on this space, jumping on this idea of self-education and self-learning. We obviously have programs within Accepted that drive this even more. Our researchers program, for instance, is geared towards independent researchers and researchers that are focusing on a particular project. We run that every quarter or so, kind of follows the term structure. So we've got a cohort running at the moment. And I think it's just amazing to see people take on this journey of self-learning. For myself, this journey really started 5 years ago when I did some online courses, some night courses through the universities around me in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And I have just developed this love of learning ever since. And I have done a lot of self-learning throughout that time with whatever was available to me. Some of the resources that I use are YouTube. I look up curriculums from graduate courses through Google. I also have just kind of developed this idea of reading what I want to read and then trying to evaluate it and trying to think about it critically. And in doing so, I've developed particular ways of obtaining that information and ways that I've developed particular ways of retaining that information in my brain. And so I have found it really, really amazing to be able to do that whenever I have the time to do it. Obviously, I have not had the time in the last couple of years since I've been doing my master's to do this. And I'm really, really excited to jump back into it because I do have a personal curriculum. I'm actually missing a book. One moment. Based around these books, which I will talk about in a second, plus one other. And maybe this inspires you to take on your own personal curriculum or formulate your own personal curriculum. I think the important thing about these is not to set too lofty goals. With self-learning, it is self-directed, and so you need to set aside time in your day to focus on these pieces. So for me, what I've actually ended up doing for my structure is I've broken it down by week, and I've allowed myself approximately 10 hours a week. The reason that this is so high is because there is part of this research that leads into my PhD. I will be technically starting my PhD once I have received my transcript for my master's. However, I am in contact with my PhD supervisor at Trinity College, and together we have developed a plan for my research that allows me to continue doing research while not formally being registered yet. And it's very, very light touch. It's essentially rereading The Fairy Queen. For those that don't know, my research is based in this epic poem, The Fairy Queen, by Edmund Spenser. So the first 3 books of The Fairy Queen were published in 1590. Then the second edition was published in 1596, which included books 4 to 6. And then in 1609, the first full folio of The Fairy Queen was published. So in my master's dissertation, I just focused on book 1 of The Fairy Queen. My PhD is going to look at the entirety of this poem. And so part of my personal curriculum, which is also my PhD plan, is to reread this. But I thought to keep it exciting, and I thought to kind of expand my mind a little bit, I would incorporate this into my personal curriculum. But just so you're aware, why there's like 10 hours assigned is because it is actually including some of my PhD research. What have I decided to look at for my personal curriculum? So I have 5 books here that I'm going to talk through. These 5 books are Sarah Clegg's Woman's Law. This is directly related to my research. This is 4,000 Years of Sirens, Serpents, and Succumbi. Clegg is fantastic in tracing those images of those animalistic and monstrous women through centuries. this kind of hits a little bit to my research, which is on the feminine images of monstrous woman within the Fairy Queen. So there's a lot of parallels. I'm almost finished with this book. I was reading it ahead of my dissertation and I used a fair bit of it in my dissertation. I've only got like a couple of like 2.5 chapters left in this book, but I did want to kind of read it as a part of my personal curriculum, so I'm putting that in there. The next book that I want to read is Ovid's Metamorphosis. This is translated by Charles Martin but introduced by Emily Wilson. If you've been around here, you know that I am a massive fan of Emily Wilson. Her translation of Homer's Odyssey is one of my favorites, and I still have her Iliad to read. I haven't read that yet, but this also kind of tends a little bit to my research. There is a fair few references from Metamorphosis that appear in the Fairy Queen. So as I said, I have not read this classic piece of literature, but I'm really excited to dive into that. The next 3 are all a part of my 2025 TBR. If you haven't seen that, I will leave that link here. My 2025 TBR is essentially 25 books that I've pulled out that I want to read in 2025. And so far, just to give you a quick update on that, I have read 15. I've read 15. Is that right? 10, yeah. So I've read 15 out of the 25 of my books that I've pulled from my 2025 TBR. But 3 of them are actually here. These I pulled as a part of my 2025 TBR, and so I have incorporated them into my personal curriculum. The first is Dante's Inferno. This is... I find it funny that I pulled this not knowing or not realizing that Catabasis was coming out this year, and so I kind of started reading this ahead of reading Catabasis. I never finished it, but it was a really interesting read. As I say, I haven't finished it, so I was self-teaching myself Dante's Inferno, and so I wanted to incorporate that. The next book that I want to incorporate, this is George Saunders' A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. This is his lectures on the Russian short story, and basically contains a whole lot of Russian short stories, contains a whole lot of Russian short stories, and then analyzes them not only for their not only as a literary student but also as a writer. And so I particularly picked this up to try and improve my writing, and so that's kind of the point of that. And then I've got this fantastic book that I got as a part of the Dublin Literary Award shortlist in 2022. Mad that was that long ago. This is Nupiming's The Cure for White Ladies by Leanne Betesamusak Simpson. This has been on my shelf for ages and ages and ages, and I'm desperate to read this. I love this part of the blurb. To read Simpson's work as an act of decolonization, degentrification, and willful resistance. It is a breaking open of the self to a world alive with people, animals, ancestors, and spirits who are all busy with the daily labors of healing not only themselves but their individual pieces of the network, of the web that connects them all together. Enter and be changed. So, all those books, including The Fairy Queen, are a part of my personal curriculum. And the way that I have formulated this, as I've mentioned, is I have tasks per week that I have to undertake, and I have grouped these all together in my Paper Republic portfolio, my A4 portfolio. This is what I am going to be taking to university, and in here is my notebook, my PhD notebook. And the reason I've actually kept this all in one is because I will be using this for my PhD research, and I still think that even if some of this, well, even if I know that some of this is contemporary, there is still a fair bit in here that I know will probably translate itself into my PhD. So I wanted to keep all of my notes together. And as you can see, I have developed out my personal curriculum. So let's talk through it really, really briefly. What I will be doing, which I was going to talk through in a bit, but what I will be doing in this is I will be keeping myself accountable for this personal curriculum by doing a video every month on what I have learned. So I have actually divided this across 3 months until the end of the year, and in each of those months I will be focusing on a particular thing. The final submission that I have set myself is to do a full-blown video essay on everything. So if you want to check that out, then go ahead, subscribe, and follow along in this journey. So the first objective is the full reading analysis of The Fairy Queen, all 6 books, plus the additional texts that are in here. I am also going to be, as I said, I am including the self-study of Dante, Ovid, Saunders, and Simpson, each week as interlocutors. I'm hoping that what I can do is, by breaking these down into shorter sections, is that I can create a dialogue between the texts and hopefully gain some understanding a bit more about what is being discussed in each of them. I'm going to be anchoring each week with themes of transformation, morality, and storytelling. And each week I will be required to do a mini essay or an abstract. Mini essays are actually something that are new to me, and that I got inspired to while I was browsing on YouTube. One of the YouTubers that I follow, whose name now I cannot remember, but they did a video on mini essays, and so I will be doing a similar thing and recording everything in the process. I've got 12 weeks, and I have set aside approximately 10 hours per week, as I said, because this includes my PhD. So in the first 4 weeks, I will be focusing on allegory, transformation, and descent. As I said, this is primarily going to be focused around the Fairy Queen. I'm hoping to read a book a week with the Fairy Queen. As I said, the Fairy Queen's divided into 6 books, and I have linked up each of the books with a complementary text. So for the first week, where I'll be doing Epic Beginnings, I have set myself up to read the book 1 of the Fairy Queen, and book 1 of Ovid's Metamorphosis, which centers around creation, Daphne and Apollo. The themes I'm pulling out at the moment are holiness, temptation, and importantly, allegory as myth. And my prompt that I have a prompt each week, and my prompt that I have is compare Ovid's fluid myths with Spencer's allegorical transformations, and how do each frame change as a moral lesson. I don't know if actually I'll talk through all of these, but essentially that gives you kind of a structure of what I will be focusing on. the next week will be book 2, will still be Ovid. In week 3, I will move on to Dante's Inferno when I compare book 3 of The Fairy Queen. And I will continue with Dante's Inferno, and then in the next month I will do craft, storytelling, and multiplicity. This is where Saunders comes in and goes through the last 2 books of The Fairy Queen, as well as the mutability cantos. There are additional mutability cantos. I jump back to Ovid when I talk about the mutability cantos, and then